Some dare call it conspiracy.
And welcome back. In the first video we were discussing the origins of the Illuminati and Freemason conspiracy myth, and we explored briefly how that myth gave birth to the anti-Semitic and Satanic grand conspiracy theories of the 1800s, which still dominate today's conspiracy movements. From my knowledge of the grand conspiracy, I recognize that there are two key players from the early to mid-20th century whose work was the direct continuation of Abbe Barruel and John Robison's, and were fundamental to our modern-day conspiracy influencers. This is the MetaConspiracy, Part 2. And so we move to early 20th century Britain, commonly referred to as the Downton Abbey era, or Peaky Blinder times, which both provide a perfect contextual backdrop to the life and times of one of the most important and influential figures of modern-day conspiracism, Nesta Helen Webster. Before World War I, Ms. Webster was a British author and a strong, outspoken feminist who had a strange interest in the French Revolution. Not that interest in the Revolution was strange, no. It's that Nesta Webster had become convinced she was the reincarnation of the French Countess of Saban, the mistress and eventual wife of Knights of Malta member Count de Boufflers, who had lost their fortune and were exiled after the French Revolution. But the horrors of the First War and its wake left a deep wound on the collective hearts of everyone who survived. And similar to the period after the French Revolution, questions started to rise among some people as to how this had happened. Spurred on by a bizarre mix of her reincarnation, the writings of the previously mentioned John Robison, Barruel, and the hoaxed Protocols of Zion, in 1919, Nesta Webster resurrected the reactionary conspiracism in a series of her own books. She put forth the idea that the same group that orchestrated the French Revolution had also orchestrated the war she had lived through, and the worker revolutions popping up in Europe and Russia. The following year, Winston Churchill himself praised Nesta Webster and her conspiracy theories in his 1920 article, Zionism versus Bolshevism, a struggle for the soul of the Jewish people. For anyone unclear of these terms, Churchill was defining Zionism as a conservative right wing of theistic Jewish people, and Bolshevism as the progressive atheistic left wing. This movement among the Jews is not new. From the days of Spartacus Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx, and down to Trotsky, Bela Kun, Rosa Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman, this worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization and for the reconstitution of society on the basis of arrested development, of envious malevolence, and impossible equality has been steadily growing. It played, as modern writer Miss Webster has so ably shown, a definitely recognizable part in the tragedy of the French Revolution. By 1921, in World Revolution, she had concluded that the Illuminati served Jewish masters, were plotting the global communist takeover on behalf of the cabal, had created a progressive left to do it, and the politics were satanic. In 1926, Nesta published what she believed was the antidote to the Grand Conspiracy, the need for fascism in England. She was a prominent member of 3 different fascist parties in her time, and supported both Adolf Hitler and the persecution of the Jewish population in 1930s Germany. She wrote, "Those of us in England who have been subjected for years to a real boycott organized by Jews can hardly be expected to shed tears over the turning of the tables." But in 1939 she withdrew her support of Germany's Führer. And not because she had seen the truth of Herr Hitler's monstrous regime. No. It was the Nazi-Soviet Pact, a treaty of non-aggression between Germany and the USSR. That was one goose step too far for Nesta. After the Second World War, Webster had grown tired of documenting the cabal's world revolution, and she dedicated the rest of her time to a biography and her French Revolution romance writings. She died in 1960 at the age of 83, but her books would continue to inspire many other authors, lecturers, politicians, and businessmen, including the Candyman, Robert Welch. On December 8, 1958, a group of 12 men met in Indianapolis, Indiana, at the behest of Robert Welch Jr. This was the first meeting of the John Birch Society, a highly influential group which are responsible for many of the conspiracy theory talking points that we hear today, especially among American conservatives. But first, before I tell you what happened at that meeting, who was there, and what influence they would eventually have, let me tell you who the founder was. Just like all of the aforementioned characters in my previous chapters, Robert Welch Jr. was an exceptionally clever person. He was enrolled in high school at the age of 10 and admitted to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, a public Ivy school, at the age of 12. After graduating, he was interested in a military career, but by the end of World War I, he decided on a new path. He then attended Harvard Law School, but dropped out after 3 years as he was bored and had enough of the school and its Marxist professor. Welch then pursued a career in business and eventually founded his own confectionery company, the Oxford Candy Company, which sadly went out of business due to the Great Depression. Fortunate for him, though, his brother's candy company survived. And recognizing Robert's talent for marketing, he was hired as Director of Sales and Advertising. He retired a very wealthy man in 1956, but chose not to live out the rest of his days in leisure. That same year, he published a magazine called One Man's Opinion, which he later changed to American Opinion. This then leads us to that fateful night on December 8, 1958. Robert Welch stood before his selected guests and lectured them of a global conspiracy and his plan to defeat it for 2 whole days. The most notable among those guests were Fred Koch, founder of Koch Industries and the father to Koch brothers David and Charles Koch. Fred would go on to bankroll the John Birch Society for a decade until his death. Also present was Revelo P. Oliver, a man responsible for adding the communist angle to the JFK assassination conspiracy theories, who gave his testimony to the Warren Commission, which was set up to investigate the assassination. He was also responsible for helping William Luther Pierce set up the white nationalist neo-Nazi organization National Alliance. Pierce also wrote the Turner Diaries, a horrifically racist novel about a future race war in America, which, by the way, got 2 thumbs up from the Oklahoma bomber Timothy McVeigh. So what did Robert Welch believe was so pressing, so important to call these men to his 2-day-long meeting? It was, of course, to expose a grand conspiracy. But not only to expose it, no, Welch had a plan, and that plan was to defeat it. Driven both by Barruel and Robison's conspiracy and the yarns spun by British fascist Nesta Webster, whose books were promoted and sold through the JBS, Welch spoke first of the Illuminists' plot orchestrated by a group he termed the Insiders. These insiders had a plan. A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from only example. To Robert Welch, the threat of a communist conspiracy intent on global domination just wasn't enough to get the average American to take notice and defend the country with their lives. So, he decided he would need a little extra sauce. This is a worldwide battle, the first in history, between light and darkness, between freedom and slavery, between the spirit of Christianity and the spirit of Antichrist for the souls and bodies of men. That'll do it. Within 2 years, the society had gained between 60 to 100,000 members nationwide. The society was organized into small cells with no more than 25 members per chapter. These cells were then given missions to join the PTA and local government, to write letters about the conspiracy to sitting politicians, and to distribute the society's conspiracy-based literature. Those theories spread by the JBS were The United Nations is a front for the New World Order. Their goal is a one-world government, and this plan is all laid out in the UN's Agenda 21. The Civil Rights Movement was part of the socialist plot, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was an Illuminati insider. Fluoride was being added to the water and other products to subdue the American people. This plot was to destroy the nuclear family, so they opposed abortion rights and the indoctrination of children through sex education. And of course, the usual boogeymen were also mentioned. Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group. And although Robert Welch Jr. himself stressed this was not a Jewish conspiracy, he of course added the Rothschilds and Rockefeller dynasties as key globalist insiders. Any of that sound familiar to you? If it does, that will probably be due to these four people that catapulted this myth into our everyday conversations during the late 90s and early 2000s. We need to talk about Jordan Maxwell, William Cooper, Alex Jones, and David Icke. So click on that subscribe button and please share this with any friend or family member that has fallen down the rabbit hole. Much love, many blessings, peace. Thank you for listening to Some Dare Call It Conspiracy. Follow us on Twitter @SomeDarePodcast for all the latest from us. And if you want to support us, please consider joining us on patreon.com/SomeDareCallItConspiracy. You'll be able to get early access to episodes, including each full deep dive series on day one, and exclusive Patreon-only episodes. When you subscribe to our Initiate tier for a $5 or our Handler tier for a $10, you'll get a welcome pack of 4 of Neil's books, 8 of my albums and EPs, and a PDF of Headache Comics 4, courtesy of Nicholas C. Gray. And to our first Patreons, thank you so much for your support from the both of us at Some Dare Call It Conspiracy.